this next session, there's been a lot of headlines out this year around some pharma clinical trials, around drug discovery for Alzheimer's and those suffering from that. And they haven't been very positive. So, but what we're starting to see is that there's a lot of technology that's coming in to help serve not only those afflicted with it, but for the people that are caring for them. So I'm really excited about this next session. I'm going to invite everyone up to the stage while I introduce all of you, sorry. Like every other one. I want to introduce Richard Louie. You guys might all recognize him. He's a news anchor on MSNBC and NBC, and also has a really own personal story around this topic. So let's give him a round of applause to start.
Thank you, Jill, so much, and good afternoon to all of you. We hope on this very panel here, this dais, to dig into something that is important to all of us and many of you personally as well as professionally. And we will try to answer the question specifically, who will rescue Alzheimer's if pharma cannot? All right, I like the laugh out there. That was good, because we're gonna enjoy this conversation. It's gonna be fruitful. Right next to me, Carrie Shaw is the CEO of Embodied Labs. Next to her is David Keene, Chief Technology Officer of Deterra Science. And next to David is Ted Fisher, CEO of Ageless Innovation, Joy for All, you might have heard that brand. And next to Ted is Thomas Riley, President and CEO of SeeingLike. Okay, let's start with this. Give me what you do in one sentence. What is it that you do in one sentence?
I make immersive training programs that put professional and family caregivers into the eyes and ears and bodies of older adults.
So through stories?
Through story living.
Story living.
We created the first FDA breakthrough designated device in Alzheimer's that uses reminiscence therapy to help reduce anxiety and depression in Alzheimer's patients.
Great.
We launched a line of robotic interactive companion pets for older adults. So it's having significant impact on loneliness, isolation, Alzheimer's, and dementia, and other factors that seniors are facing.
And SeeingLike combines clinicians, protocols built for and by caregivers, and technology to support complex members at home.
Who in the audience here either is living with Alzheimer's or knows somebody who is living with Alzheimer's? Who is a caregiver in this room? Great, thank you. Let's start with this. What is Alzheimer's? What is Alzheimer's?
It's an insidious form of dementia that robs the patient of their ability to function over time, and from my perspective, immerses an entire family system into the middle of the disease.
Yeah.
Is it one type? There's more than, it's not just...
I mean, there's multiple forms of dementia. Alzheimer's, I mean, there's varying degrees, obviously, and what you see is not just the impact on the person that's, afflicted with it, it impacts everyone around them, their family, the community, others, so it's wide-ranging, and it's not just an individual that's suffering with it.
The more that we learn about Alzheimer's, the more we find out that it's not just one disease. It's 40 or 50 different diseases that all manifest themselves in the same way. And much like cancer, we're going to have to target those diseases slightly separately, which is going to increase the barrier for pharma companies to have to deal with that.
Yeah, there's more than 20 kinds of dementia, and Alzheimer's is one of them, the most commonly diagnosed one. And it's a buildup of things in your brain that keep your neurons from talking to each other.
So what's your personal stories? And by the way, the format here is, since I'm the cable news anchor, I want you to get along, but don't be afraid of not getting along. And feel free to interrupt each other, okay? Because I'll point to you, but still just go for it when you can. So me personally, my father has Alzheimer's. I've been a long distance caregiver for 5 years now. flying from New York, 30 Rock, where my studios are at, to San Francisco, where my father and where I grew up in that city. So I've been going back and forth for about now 4 years. I fly about 400,000 to 500,000 miles a year. My father is now in the later stages of the disease. He has been just moved in the last 6 months into an assisted care facility. Something we did not want to do in my family. We tried our darndest to fight for him, and we still do fight for him. That's my interest in this space, and that's how I started to do stuff with AARP and the Alzheimer's Association, and we get to be here with all of you today to talk about some great ideas to move forward on this. How about the four of you?
Yeah, when I was 19, my mom got diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. She was 49. She lived for 12 years with her Alzheimer's, and over the course of the 12 years, my two sisters, my dad, and I all took turns living at home and being her primary care team. And so my time that I was at home with her was when she needed home health aides, and I was just firsthand saw that I didn't know how to care for her. I had a lot of trouble understanding what was going on in her brain. I couldn't really even imagine that. And then I saw that professional caregivers are unsung heroes, are
Right.
CNAs, and they became essentially a part of my family as we all learned how to best care for my mom.
Right. And that drove you to do what you're doing today.
Yeah.
That's the inspiration.
It is.
I was raised by my grandparents, so from an early age I was able to see them both in the prime of their life and then as they deteriorated over time. My grandmother had 9 years of pretty severe dementia, and she just passed away recently, so she was one of the main reasons why I got into working with people with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah, I have a 97-year-old grandmother who I call my personal focus group. She lives in a memory care facility 10 miles from a big, huge Italian family, and she still spends 20 plus hours of her day alone. And so you see the isolation, you see the loneliness, you see what happens when the connections don't happen. And so, it's one of those situations where you know that you're dealing with it. Everybody you talk to has a story.
The amount of isolation, even in care facilities that are meant to be places where
Right.
they're not alone, is astounding.
She's in a community, but she's alone. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've been fortunate to be a caregiver for both my parents and my aunt and uncle.
Yes.
So there's one left. My uncle, he turned 88 last week, and he is on the path to the memory unit now. And he all four of them, two of them died at home. My parents, my aunt died in a facility after being there 3 months, and my uncle's memory issues have made it impossible for him to stay at home. So reluctantly, he's there now.
I thank all four of you for bringing your heart to what you do professionally, because that makes it really cool.
It's actually a blessing.
It's a blessing.
It is.
It's an honor, as Tom was saying. It's
Indeed.
an honor to do that. Talk about your honor, and now bring your brain into this space for a second. And Jill kicked us off by saying pharma, right? You can certainly see the headlines. It's been, a decade and a half since we've seen something big from pharma. Why has it been a decade and a half? And can pharma turn the corner after billions of dollars? More money this year from NIH, $2 billion for them to really soak into this. What's sort of the reason why? And what's the solution after that, if you want to offer that up? Any of you?
I think there's 50 plus different forms that are sort of manifesting itself, and so it's a situation where it's not one thing that is trying to be addressed. I do think it's a
Right.
really difficult thing to solve, but
The hydra's getting bigger, more heads are growing.
and the more money that gets poured in doesn't necessarily correlate. Obviously, you think it would, but it's still growing, and the population is growing. That's getting it, on a daily, minute-to-minute basis now. So it's a really bigger and bigger problem as it goes forward.
So you're saying pharma can't keep up in a way?
I think the complexity of the task is a lot harder too. We're looking at, for most of pharma's industry lifetime, they've been dealing with a compound that deals with a chemistry in the body. And now we're looking at, working with the chemistry in the body to then take the next step and see how does it change our cognition, or how does it change the way our mind works. It's like saying to people who is a carpenter,
Yeah.
you've got all these tools to deal with wood. Well, come on into the data center and fix our buggy computers. And it's a level of complexity that we haven't had to deal with before.
I think we still have just a huge awareness issue. I don't think that we as a population know how to voice the early signs of Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. We're afraid of it, so we aren't addressing it. And I think, that's not pharma specifically, but we have to be able to, as a community, voice what is Alzheimer's, and especially Alzheimer's in the earlier stages.
Right. Very difficult too, early stages.
Yeah.
And Tom, with 40 or 50 million caregivers in this space, we are looking at the very people that can tell the stories, right? We are the ones, those who are caregivers in this room. We're the ones that can go out and say, hey, we need a solution here, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and look, there's no happier day for your father or any of our relatives when Pharma comes through here, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
This panel wouldn't exist, and it would be terrific, right? Trying to find a way to recognize how to support people through this as we deal with stigma and lack of understanding and the variety, the various forms of the disease. It's where we are in our space and time. And so, I said this morning in a talk, previous to this past year, if you were a family caregiver, it was like you get up in the morning and you got into your car and you turned the key and it didn't work, and you called your mechanic and your mechanic said, don't worry about it, you can figure this out. I mean, that was family caregiving. It feels like in the last year, the RAISE Act, the 40s Stay with the Care Act, CMS starting to pay for social determinants of health. There's an increasing awareness that the family caregiver is an integral part of the ecosystem, especially around this particular disease.
Okay, I'm going to give you any amount of money you want. What's that amount, and where are you going to put it to address this issue of, again, getting rid of Alzheimer's, finding a way to soften the blow? How much money, and where are you going to put it?
100 million Swiss bank account.
100 billion?
Yeah.
Swiss?
It was a number.
Okay.
It was just a number.
All right, sure.
I don't know the answer to that question, honestly. I mean, I just think I'm not sure what it's going to take.
Yeah, and I think you asked for two different things. You said both soften the blow and get rid of Alzheimer's.
That's right.
I think that there's lots of technologies that we can use to soften the blow, and some of it is increased education for caregivers. Some of it is using like reminiscence therapy or different training techniques. These are all things that will soften the blow. But if we want to get rid of Alzheimer's, I don't think we can make the statement that Pharma can't. This is a
You're going to defend
process.
Pharma.
I'm going to defend Pharma.
That's fine.
Look, Pharma has spent billions of dollars on this problem. Pharma will continue to spend billions of dollars on this problem. And just because we haven't had wild successes doesn't mean that we won't have wild successes in the future. And to give up is to give up on, I think, the disease state.
So are you in the same space with 100 billion? The rest of you kind of, I know it's, there's no.
These are crazy numbers.
I know,
I don't
these
know.
are crazy numbers.
I'm not sure that's even the right number. I think we need capital to flow to a bunch of different areas. We need it to flow to drug discovery for certain, but we absolutely need it to flow to the technologies that support people that are dealing with this disease, and not only the patients themselves, but the people around them.
So now let's flip to the other side. Okay, and if you do want to address Pharma, please, if you'd like. Well, what's the alternative then? Let's say Pharma cannot. What's one technology that you like that can be used in this space? And it could be very simple, it can be very complex, but give me one. Any of you?
I think we're all going to be biased here. Most of us have technologies that help in this state. So it's going to be like a short advertisement for each one of us.
Well, go ahead and do the short advertisement. I'm ready.
So for example, we use reminiscence therapy, which is simply looking at photos from your past, hearing voices that you recognize, listening to music that you recognize, are all things that can all bring you back and help you to remember, and in many cases bring back moments of lucidity. One of the problems with Alzheimer's isn't that the memories are gone forever. It's that those memories aren't accessible to the person who is in a moment of crisis. They're in fight or flight mode where, in some cases, where am I? Why can't I go back to my house that was sold 3 years ago and now I'm in a facility? And bringing someone and presenting those memories back for them that they
How do
can
you do
access
that?
themselves.
Let's say I'm gonna be that person. What is that experience like when you do this?
So if you've got the time and the energy, it can be as simple as sitting down with a loved one with a photo album and looking at photos and talking about them.
Okay.
But for many people who don't live near their parents, like you do on the other side of the country, there's technology that works and that can help with that. That's what our device does. It's an FDA breakthrough device that shows people those photos, presents it to them, but we also have a biofeedback. We watch the expressions of the person and we know what moves the needle with that person. What photos move the needles, what music moves the needles. We can build up a profile that during times of anxiousness we can move to the things that we know will have the greatest
Visual
effect.
or sound or smell more effective? How do you balance that in your stew?
I think it depends on the person.
Okay.
And it really is a lot to do with what they lived in their life. If you've got someone who drove to work every day and listened to their favorite music and had 20 favorite albums, that's going to be a music person. That's the way that their personality works. If you've got someone who is a photo album person, was taking photos of their family all the time, that's going to be a photo person. And you've got to figure out for each person what's the key that unlocks the reduction of anxiety for them.
Yeah, I'd add to that. When we launched Joy for All, 4 years ago, we had heard a lot about the epidemic of loneliness and isolation and leading to other issues. But fast forward a few years and you see it's a simple product. It's an interactive robotic pet that looks and feels like a real cat and dog. And what we found is that there are people that we had no idea were nonverbal for a year and got the cat in the fluffy, and they immediately, so it sparks something. And so it's a very simple product. I don't try and there's technology in it, but the reality is what has worked is the fact that it's familiar.
Right.
It's something that people care for it and trust and interacts, and it brings back. And so some people it's music, some people it's pets, some people so I think I don't think there's a solution.
How much does it cost?
The cats retail $99 and the dog's about $120.
Okay. How much does it cost?
So we're not commercial yet.
How much will it cost?
Well, hopefully we can be reimbursed by Medicare. We're looking to be a reimbursed, prescribed solution for doctors to be able to give.
Great. I'm getting a sense here, Carrie. You want to say something?
So I'm wearing the earliest prototype of what became Embodied Labs. My mom had this visual deficit. She had her right brain was shrinking, so she couldn't see out of the left halves of both of her eyes. And so this was something I realized I could do for me, for my mom's caregivers, that by putting this on and immersing ourselves in her perspective, we could intuit better care for her. So I knew, okay, well, here's where I need protection. My left side is left unprotected. If someone's gonna see me, or I'm gonna see someone, they should come from the right. And she would do this thing where she'd eat exactly half of her plate of food, so we'd have to rotate it so she'd finish. And so what we do at Embodied Labs is we actually took it a step further, because Alzheimer's is not a visual deficit. It's not one thing. It's not simple. Everybody has a story, like we've said. And so my background is in public health and in medical illustration and visualization. So we say, let's interview lots of people living with this disease, and then let's film a live action, immersive story that actually puts you into a perspective of somebody living with Alzheimer's, with Lewy body dementia, with Parkinson's, and not only live in their story, but go inside their body and look at what the disease is doing from the perspective of the neurons in the brain. And so we've taken these different labs, embodied labs. They're short 5-minute journeys that just give you a sense for different issues, whether it's caregiver burnout, care plan discussions, or actually knowledge about the disease. And we educate all sorts of caregivers. And we're selling this to our providers, our senior living community centers, our home health agencies. And they're not only educating their staff this way, but they're providing it as a link and a bridge to family caregivers.
And have they seen an increase in efficiency then? Or care, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, so we've been measuring things like knowledge about different diseases, about behavior change. So what care practices can you actually learn by doing this? And then we've started actually making a caregiver role-playing feature where you can embody your own role and practice how to deal with agitation and things that cause falls before you're hit with it for the very first time in real life. So yeah, we've been measuring behavior change and then also confidence and the way it impacts caregivers, feeling empowered to actually take on some of these roles.
Give me a number that you look at, Carrie, in your product development, your products. that you are looking at, and what is that number, what is that criterion, and why do you look at that?
Number in
just
terms
a
of-
number, any number. Like, sometimes when you're looking at spreadsheets, there's a certain adoption rate. Like, so that's a key number that you might be looking at if you're going to invest in something. For you, it's about care and communicating to caregivers what that experience is like. How do you measure that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think you measure it. It's about behavior and public health, and it's not one thing, but it's a lot of pieces together. And so there's, you can say, well, what do you know about a disease? Or I'm trying to go back to your number question. I like that.
Yeah.
I just 100 is kind of what stuck out to me, because when we do a lot of our work to get the stories of others, we usually talk to at least 100 people that are firsthand frontline dealing with these things.
Cool.
So SeeingLike serves over 5,000 very complex individuals at home. We support the family caregiver with technology protocols that we built with the caregivers and our clinicians, sometimes at the kitchen table, sometimes a remote coach. And that laboratory that we've run for the last 10 years has allowed us to pull rich data from inside the home. About 25% of those folks are dealing with dementia in the home, and Alzheimer's disease, of course. And so we've created a protocol where we can risk stratify both the caregiver and the member, because it's a combination. You have to know where the caregiver is in their knowledge base and where the member is in their disease. And based on that risk stratification, we can use our collaboration technology and remote coaching to support the family caregiver around the management of behavior, around the progression of the disease. But again, our secret sauce here, I think, is really understanding where both parties are in their journey, medically and psychologically, so that we can intervene in the right way.
What's my experience in 30 seconds? I'm the caregiver, I'm at home, taking care of my dad, I'm working with SeeingLike.
Yeah,
What's my experience?
so our technology it's like Slack for caregivers in healthcare. It's an asynchronous communication collaboration environment. So you don't have to be ready to be on the phone with me. When it's appropriate for you to communicate with me, you do that asynchronously, and I'm there for you to support you with content, to answer your questions, to administer our protocol depending on where you are.
Why is he staring? Why is he not eating? Why is he wandering? Things like that into this community.
Why, it's the first time he really doesn't know who I am.
Right.
Precisely.
And then I'll find a community. I'll have some experts at SeeingLike that will help me.
So
through this.
you have a coach that sits behind our platform, Vela, to coach you through this.
Great. How much does it cost me?
So it depends. We get paid by both managed care and Medicaid directly. It depends on the model. So it's $50 PMPM to a pretty high daily rate, because I also offer a nursing home replacement model at half the cost.
Really? And what's that cost?
About $70 a day.
$70 a day. I didn't ask you how much yours is.
It's about per business, about $350 a month.
$350 a month. And what's the number that you like? And tell me what that number is.
So because we've always followed the risk, we don't have a direct-to-consumer bone in our body, I don't think. So we're focused on lowering ED visits and hospitalization rates. So our target is to lower hospitalization rates by 25% at a minimum.
And have you?
Yes, consistently.
That is great. Have you calculated what that meant for each and every one of these families?
We know what it means to the payers
Yes.
who care about the care. Yep.
Heck yeah.
So in that similar vein, so we won a couple of awards over the last few years, a Dementia Smart Award, a Caregiver Friendly Award. It got the attention of some clinicians and academics. And in November at the GSA, two of the independent researchers that had been doing different tests with our product presented. And one was Pace University, who did, in a post-acute setting in an emergency room, a 65-year-old patient that got admitted for some reason, whatever it might be, 90 got PETs and 90 got a 15-minute visit from the nurse practitioner. And in every measure of happiness, sense of purpose, speed to discharge, lower readmit rates, medication avoidance, caregiver happiness, ability to deal with the patient more easily because they had this bridge. So you think about, this is an animatronic robotic pet that is lowering the cost of care and providing joy and well-being to the person who has it, and more importantly, meaningful connections to those around them. And so when we talk about pharma getting the lion's share of the dollars that come from government funding, those type of things, I think it's we've got to keep investing there. But I do think there are so many different non-traditional interventions that are having significant impact.
Sure.
That we've got to start thinking differently about how you fund this, because a bed day, is $6,000 to $13,000 depending on it. So if you lower the readmit rate by 70% because somebody got a less than $100 product, it's a no-brainer. Right?
Is that a real number?
It's a real number.
70%. Say it again.
So it was a small sample set, but I don't want to. But they said it was like 70% on the readmit rate. So.
Got a number for me?
I don't know if my dog can manage that number. So because we're at CES and I'm the only non-CEO on the panel, I'm going to give a technical answer.
Cool.
The numbers that are most important to us is the 64 facial landmarks that we look at.
64.
Then turn into a series of vectors that allow us to see the expressions and infer emotions from the people that are looking.
That's really so. Where are most of them? Where are most of them, Dave, on the face?
Well, most of them are in the eye, nose, and mouth region. We do track landmarks all over the outside of the head so that we can see how people are listing their head to the side or if they're looking at the screen. But the important ones are, sort of right in here, and that can let you see if someone is in distress, if they've got a flat affect, if they're experiencing joy, or if they're having anxiousness.
And can I just use my phone?
Well, all of this technology could work on a phone, and many digital therapeutics use a phone for delivery, but with this patient population, that's just not possible.
Okay.
You've got people who have severe hearing issues. They're not going to be able to hear a phone. In fact, in our early beta tests, we had these tablets that were like Google Nexus 7s. They're about the size of my book, and everyone would do the same thing. Our human factors testing was this. They'd, yeah. It's just not loud enough. It needs to be wirelessly charged. It needs to have a lot of things that aren't available on your phone. But the components inside are very similar.
So I know I asked you how much money is needed, which was an unfair question. Let me try another unfair question. I give you $10, and how do you divide it up? Pharma being one category, and what would be the other categories that you put the $10? The way you divide it up? Because basically, I think we're all in agreement. It's not going to be one or the other. It's going to be everything, right? Working really hard. However, I have heard, you just said it, that we need more in the non-pharma space. There's not enough energy. There's not enough gumption. There's not enough interest at the moment. But we do think that things are changing because caregivers are talking.
Right.
How would you divide $10 up?
Well, if I'm a family member dealing with someone with it now and pharma looks 10 years out, I probably have a pretty different perspective, right? I want to make life better for those around me, my loved ones, as quickly as possible. So I think, if I was dividing the pot, it would have to be at least even, right?
50-50? $5 for pharma, $5 for non?
50-50 at least, because you're seeing immediate impact, you're seeing immediate improvement, and 10 years out isn't going to work for some of the folks that are, in the current situation, or 5 years out, or whatever it might be.
I think that's right. I mean, if we're the venture capital community here,
you are.
Then I think you have to invest in the long run. So we got to have half the resources going to pharma, but we really have to focus on getting real resources to those caregivers and professional and non-professional caregivers around the disease, so that we can have an impact today.
Yeah, because if you help the caregiver, you help the individual living with Alzheimer's.
Totally, that's right.
How would you divide up the $10? I'll give you more, but how would you divide the 10?
250 times 4, so I'd do 250 on research, and then to the person living with the disease, to the care team, and then to the provider.
So 4.
4.
Cool. It is a really unfair question because it's not the way our economy works. We don't have a centralized control economy where we decide where to distribute assets. And so
I'm never fair.
And so the good news is that even if I have my $10 to distribute out, the pharma companies are spending their own money on that. They're not spending my money on that. And so I think that there's more hope than simply how we would distribute our funds.
What is it? For the folks in the room here, what do you want them to walk away thinking and doing differently after this session? What's the one thing you want them to think and do differently after they finish listening to your discussion today?
Recognize early signs of dementia. So we talk a lot about late stages. We need to be talking about early signs of dementia.
And how do they do that? Okay, I want to do that. How do I do that now?
Yeah.
Your product.
My product.
Product.
Great, plug for me. No, it's, what happens when you're going to the grocery store and trying to go shopping? What are some of the first, things your driving changes, your spatial abilities change? How do we get people talking about and recognizing early signs of dementia? So to me, it's always about education and training. And really just saying, we can be talking about things that are this disease way before we forget who somebody is. That is such a small part of the disease, and the caregiver journey starts so far before that. So I think that to me is where we would go.
Cool, great.
I would say, based on everything I've learned about reminiscence therapy and the importance of memories, go create good memories and record them in a way that you can go back to them later in life. If you have a wonderful day with your kids at the park and you don't take a picture or you don't write a note about it, you won't remember it 2 weeks from now, let alone 30 years from now. But if you record it, then you've got something to go back to. So create those memories now.
Yeah, now when I asked you about that, Dave, we talked before we came on stage, you brought up your kids.
You were cheating.
Yeah, you brought up your kids as to why. Like you gave me an example of your kids and creating memories together.
Right, I mean, in a lot of ways, that's why I started this company. I was diagnosed with colon cancer 5 years ago, and one of my biggest fears was that my 2 kids wouldn't remember the sound of my voice or any of my stories or see my perspective in the world. And so it made me realize in a way that I didn't before the importance of stories and the importance of memories. In my case, giving them down to my kids, but I think it's just as important for us to store those memories to give to ourselves later, or to remember them to give to our parents who are suffering now.
Really cool.
Yeah, I guess I would say a couple things. One is, innovation, and we're at CES, obviously, so everything's about the latest and the greatest and the newest, and social robotics and what you're going to do. And it doesn't need to solve world hunger. It needs to solve life, day, living problems, right? So innovation, I think, we think about as being sort of this thing that's out there. We've seen firsthand that it can be pretty simple, right? There's innovation in simplicity, and that's one of the things that I think is important. And two, I think I said it before, but I think we've got to change, just the awareness about non-traditional interventions for things like this disease that we're talking about. And you said it, we don't have an economy where we can just dole out the 4 or 5. And the reality is, we should actually be looking at what works. It's the same thing in our public education system. We should be performing for our kids, and we should be rewarding based on good teaching and those types of things. It's the same sort of model to me. Is that let's find what works and invest in it.
So at CAS, this may sound a little heretical, but I think the most consistent monitor from inside the home is the 55-year-old adult daughter. She knows what's going on a longitudinal basis. She knows why something has happened, and most important, she is actually in a position to intervene if you can provide her support. So there are a number of hands went up where people acknowledged they were caregivers. I would double down on that duty and help others become aware. The final thing I would do is hold your legislators at the state level and nationally accountable. We have some momentum around family caregiving. We're not alone any longer. This isn't 44 million individual caregiving stories. These stories are coming together, and we need to keep that momentum going.
What is something we should watch in the next 2 years? What is on that not here but going to be here in 2 years that really excites the 4 of you?
I think sort of the intersection of all these great technologies, voice, AI, how does it all come together to really support some of the things that we're hearing, creating more meaningful memories, or just having a different way to present these things that we can't even at this point we're not sure yet, but it's coming together, and certainly all of them are going to play a huge role in making things better.
Yeah, I agree. Digital therapeutics, having more scientific rigor around the way that we deal with cognitive behavioral therapies delivered digitally is going to be huge. I was earlier this week sitting down with a lot of companies, pharma companies, and in the last year and a half, they've all started to hire chief digital officers and bringing on developers, and they're very serious about sort of the digital revolution in therapeutics. And I think it's going to be big.
I can't wait for us to actually adopt immersive technology and, for the magic leaps out there to get their stuff together and deliver something that gives us that ability to go into augmented or virtual reality seamlessly. And I think when that happens, we'll see that we'll be all enabled to live our best lives further beyond what we physically can without that kind of augmentation. So I think that will happen, and I can't wait.
I think I would also caution that there's a mix of human capital and technology here that needs to be balanced very carefully.
Yep.
A technology solution in healthcare is a technology-only solution is fraught with peril.
I'm excited in the next 2 years, and taking a step back, the way we talk about caregivers, because I think those are the ambassadors for this stuff. And like in my path was admitting, and many of you in the room probably went through this as well, I had to say to myself, I am a full-time caregiver. That's my full-time job. That is who I am. It's not on the side. It's not when I have extra time.
Exactly.
It is my full, straight-on, train coming through the tunnel thing I do. And I think more of us that do that, the better this whole conversation, whether I give you $10 or $100 billion, we're going to get there. That's what I'm excited about, because I think that started.
And then I think as society, we need to honor that too, right? That's
Yes.
something that people clap for.
Exactly.
And say, that's a good thing, as opposed to, oh, I'm really sorry, man.
Exactly.
And it's gotta go on your resume. I mean, what was I
I
doing
totally
from
agree.
age 24 to 28? I was
Exactly.
at home, and that
That's
isn't
right.
anywhere on my LinkedIn profile. And for the women that are majority caregivers, this has a huge impact on economy and what jobs women can take on. And if we don't have that freedom to communicate to our
right.
employers, I'm doing this, it's okay. Don't let there be backlash for that. Then we'll be able to make progress.
And when we do that, and we do put on our resume, I think there's also the idea of, well, you can get rid of some of the stereotypes. So 4 in 10 caregivers are men.
Yep.
The stereotype is it's mostly women to a much larger degree. No, that's not right.
25% are millennials.
10 million millennials are caregivers in America. 1 million children, 17 and younger, are caregivers, dealing with diseases like Alzheimer's. And I think once we get to that, that's when I'm excited in the next 2 years. Okay, so I'm going to finish with this because I've got 2 minutes to go. And I know what happens when I have 2 minutes to go because they're going to cut off my microphone. But I'm going to do a quick lightning round with you. I'm going to say whatever I want, as many words as I want. You only can say one word, okay? Deal?
Deal.
Okay. What makes you really positive about this space? What gives you joy amongst difficulty in this space of Alzheimer's and finding solutions? Told you it's not going to be fun, but not easy. Go ahead.
Stories.
People.
Impact.
Willfulness.
Pharma.
Move on.
Hurry up.
Keep going.
Encouragement.
Tech.
Please.
Tech.
Oh, I thought you said check. I was like, great.
Check, please. Check. Technology.
Humans.
Exciting.
Coexisting.
Balance.
AI, since you brought it up, AI.
Interaction.
Okay, I like that. Sounds perfect. You can do that too.
Augmentation.
Augmentation.
Human augmented.
Hey, funding and capital and all that money stuff.
Deploy
Necessary.
wisely.
Necessary.
Deploy wisely.
2 words.
He put a dash in it.
Critical.
You already went. Caregivers.
Heroes.
Heroes.
Loved ones.
Tomorrow.
Next 10 years.
Caregivers.
Health.
Come on, just react.
Hope.
Shift.
Shift. We are on time. I thank you all for a really energetic conversation. Thank you so much.